and thank you for giving me the chair. So first of all, I'm wondering whether I have to speak English or French after such an official presentation and introduction. But I see that there is no translation disposal, so I think it's perhaps better to speak English. As rector of the Agence universitaire de la francophonie, I hope to be forgiven to speak English, but I have to respect the rule defined and given by the organizers, and especially by Odile and Catherine. So I hope to be forgiven because, as you know, the Agence universitaire de la francophonie, and not French agency, it's very different, gathers all the universities in the world speaking French and teaching in French. So that's why French language is so important for us. Anyway, I hope to...
Si vous voulez parler français.
No, it's a good, and for me it's perhaps also a good opportunity to show a very open francophonie. I mean a francophonie which doesn't hesitate to speak another language, because we are here in a scientific area, and we know all that sciences has no borderlines. So before introducing our guest speakers in this round table, I would say some very simple remarks about science teaching and learning, and especially with referencing the title of the round table. The title of the round table introduces a link between science teaching and also science learning, a link between teaching and learning and development. And not development in general, but a very ambitious vision of what development should be. I mean, human, sustainable development. And we have, in this round table, we have to observe and to analyze such link, and not only in one way. Not only how science teaching and learning drives to human sustainable development, but also how links, our levels and types of development may influence science teaching and learning. Especially science teaching and learning, not only in developed countries, but also in developing countries. And it's very different. So with very simple remarks, I would like to widen the issue, considering not only developing countries as France, Italy, Europe in general, but also the conditions of science teaching and learning in developing countries, and especially, for instance, in Africa. As rector of the Agence universitaire de la francophonie, I have many opportunities to visit classrooms, to visit universities, schools in general, and I think I have I have in mind many very difficult aspects concerning science teaching. Science teaching at any level, primary level, secondary level, tertiary level, I mean higher education. And I'm not sure, in fact, that such issues are so different between different countries. So first remark about conditions in which science is taught and learned. Obviously, in such prestigious room, facing so many important scientists, we tend to think first at scientific question, pedagogical methods. For instance, having to mind the experience of la main à la pâte. That is how to give or how to recover a practical, an experimental dimension to science teaching and learning. Obviously, we have in mind something like that. And we are right to have in mind such question. This question is necessary, essential, and certainly indispensable. But, how to forget other basic conditions? And I would like to say about some very simple thing about that. Even if we assume that in many countries, perhaps in most countries, schooling rates are good, are high today. First condition I have in mind, language. Language first. We know all that for many students, in primary school, in secondary school, science teaching is complicated because of language. Because students don't understand what is said by the teacher. And even in France, we have some problems like that. And because students are not able to understand the wording, the statement of problems. And we know, for instance, through PISA results, that there is a strong correlation between language mastering and science mastering. So, how to do with that? And we have first to consider this language question. Secondly, I have in mind basic question about premises, equipment in schools. I have visited so many classrooms in which, for instance, physics teaching was made by nothing. I mean, as equipment. Sometimes blackboard, a tap, and a sink for water, and it's all. How to teach physics in such conditions? And it's the same for chemistry, for biology. So we have in mind, we must have in mind such conditions. And you guess I I'm able to quote as a basic condition, as a condition for practical experimentation in many countries. It's mostly impossible, doubly impossible, practically, and also because teachers are not prepared, are not themselves taught for that. That's why the issue of teacher training is so important. Not only initial teacher training, but also continued lifelong training. And we have to impulse something different. And I hope that the Sesame centers will be good opportunities to do that. So, other issues to quote. You understand that such difficult conditions, in order to provide a good science teaching, and especially a good experimental science teaching, leads to strong difficulties about guidance of students. Because conditions of science teaching are so bad in so many schools that most students do not want to go on with science studies. My friend, the Minister of Education and Higher Education in Senegal told me some weeks ago that in Senegal, for instance, I don't know if anybody comes from Senegal, 70% of students led studies in human and social sciences. So that's a very important problem, because Senegal needs to have scientists to improve its development. And the question is how to do that. And we are convinced that the starting point is science teaching in primary and secondary school. So we must have in mind this point. It's not, it seems to be basic, perhaps too simple for scientist spirits, but it's so necessary. Third point, what our graduated in science become after their studies. I mean, what are in so many countries perspective of jobs after science studies? If the development is not enough, how to find jobs, how to provide jobs for scientists. And that's why I'm so convinced that we have to promote strongly technical and vocational studies, training, and so on, because it's also perhaps the strongest necessity in developing countries, and notably in Africa. So, how to do with you, with scientists, with eminent scientists, how to do in order to promote this technical and vocational training and to provide scientific studies, not only to an elite, but to many students. I mean, these scientist students, so many countries need to have now? That's a question we have to raise, and I hope to solve. And I hope that, again, that the Sesame Centers will be an opportunity to do that. So, some conclusions and some questions I would like to raise to the other speakers in the round table. If, as anybody says today, development depends today of knowledge, of science, of technology, of know-how, it's obvious that science teaching and learning is necessary, but it needs strong investments, strong public investments from anywhere, from national countries, from international bodies. So it means strong efforts and basic efforts in order to give a chance, a real chance, to schools and to teachers. And for instance, we have to think about the role of digital tools, which are, in many times, good solutions facing the issue we have to face. And I have in mind investments allowing experimental teaching and learning, basically experimental teaching and learning. Of course, we have also to have in mind simultaneously shifts in method. And the question raised by La Main à la Pâte, for instance, are also very, very interesting and necessary. But how to be really ambitious? How to be really ambitious in such countries, in such developing countries? Some tracks to go on and perhaps to succeed. We have to see, for instance, how to set up in any country ambitious investment plan. That's a question raised to any government. How to use digital tools facilitating learning simulation, for instance. And to put learning by simulation, to put at disposal of schools, a maximum of digital tools. So we have to produce such tools, and it's perhaps a role of universities. And in my role as a rector of the Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie, we try to contribute to such production. How to change teacher training? Initial and lifelong training? How to increase social value and recognition of technical and vocational studies? And perhaps how to conceive a really great ambition, and especially for Africa. I'm convinced, for instance, and there is some hypothesis today already, that Africa and Europe, I mean African Union and the European Union, should join their efforts to conceive something like an African Research Council inspired by the European Research Council, but devoted to perhaps two principal aims, two inseparable aims in my view. First, to set up the so missing research infrastructures with and simultaneous compensating the weaknesses of research public policies. And secondly, to put science teaching and learning on new basis. I mean, hardware and software basis. So French President Macron launched the ambition how to make our planet great again. You remember that. And I would propose today that such an ambition should start with another formula. Make our science teaching and learning great in the entire planet. Thank you very much for attention.